to you watching this. Welcome to or welcome back to the Liability YouTube channel, where I, Bree Cheyenne, mostly talk about unsolved crimes against children, anything from older to newer. I did have quite a few things I wanted to say since I've last uploaded, and I'm not going to go over it all again because in another video I'm going to be uploading at the same time as this one. It's going to be the Zodiac Killer. You should check out the intro to that, where I say a whole bunch of more stuff than what I'm going to say in this intro. That being said, I'm not going to talk too much in this intro, and I'm just actually going to go ahead and jump right into the case. After enjoying a gorgeous spring day with her family members, 8-year-old Malakia Logan disappeared while she was biking home. It would take police years before finding out what actually happened to her, although still not finding her killer over 30 years later. Malakia Logan, also known as Kia, was born on August 1st, 1979, to parents Richard and Bernetta Logan. Her father, Richard, was the mayor of Saluda, South Carolina, and her mother, Bernetta, was a middle school teacher that had primary custody of both Kia and her sister, Renee. It was a Sunday in the small town of Greenwood, South Carolina, and the date was May 15th, 1988. 8-year-old Kia, standing at a mere 4 foot and 2 inches tall and weighing less than 100 pounds, spent the evening playing with her sister Renee and another one of their friends at the basketball court at their complex. It was a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and Kia and Renee weren't the only ones out that day. There were lots of other families barbecuing and other kids playing around as well. As the dark started to creep in, Kia decided she wanted to go home around 8:30 p.m. and she decided she was going to bike home. Renee and their friends stayed at the basketball court to play for a little bit longer. Renee returned home about no more than half an hour after Kia had left the court, only to discover that Kia had not done the same. Despite Bernetta and Renee searching for Kia, they wouldn't find her, but they would find her overturned bike outside of their apartment's office. Consequently, she was reported missing a little past 9 p.m. She was last seen wearing yellow shorts, a yellow and white polka dot shirt, and slip-on shoes. Responding officer Dennis Buford immediately called Major Sam Riley of the Greenwood Sheriff's Office, who requested anyone with information to contact their office. Buford stated that from the moment he arrived on the crime scene, he just knew something was wrong. Buford even ended up staying the night on the Logan's couch just in case they may have received a ransom call or even possibly one from Kia herself. They received nothing, and the search for Kia began the next day. Police conducted an approximately 75-person search, as well as brought in helicopters to assist, but unfortunately none of that turned over any signs of Kia or any clues, and the search was suspended until the next day. The search went into the next day. Police wouldn't release another public statement until May 18th, now 2 days after Kia's disappearance. In this statement, police let the public know that they were in search of 2 men that were identified as having been in close proximity to the apartment around the time of Kia's disappearance. One man, described as an older male with graying hair, drove a medium blue utility type van with dark tinted windows. The other man, described as middle-aged with pointed features, having a pockmarked face and brownish blonde hair, drove a mid-70s faded blue or black Monte Carlo. However, witnesses did actually fail to place Kia near the men or near the cars. Police continued to interview residents in the apartment complex, hoping to find out some more information about these men, but after they weren't able to really get any more information on them, they suspended the search after 2 days. In a separate attempt, they did establish a reward fund by the name of the Malakia Z. Logan Reward Fund to persuade anyone with information to come forward. During the evening of May 18th, a composite sketch of one of the suspects, the one that drove the Monte Carlo, was constructed from witness sightings and released to the public. Further description of this man described him as being between 5'8" and 5'9", and having a slight build, weighing about 150 pounds. By Thursday, May 19th, the mood in the apartment complex had changed drastically. The property manager, Carolyn Kelly, whose granddaughter was friends with Kia, said it was like a depression had set in, like people just were not comfortable leaving their kids out. Meanwhile, Sheriff Giles Daniels said that tips and reported sightings of Kia were pouring in, taking the investigation beyond Greenwood. Unfortunately, the leads they were trying to develop based on the composite sketch didn't really lead them anywhere, and that's really all the evidence they had to go off. The hope to find Kia dwindled as the investigation turned cold from weeks to months. On July 4th, it was now 2 months since Kia's disappearance. A local newspaper released an article detailing Bernetta's struggle in dealing with Kia's disappearance. While clutching a photo of Kia, she details how she wouldn't even leave her phone for long periods of time in the hopes that Kia might call. And she didn't even go to her family's July 4th gathering that year because she sat waiting by the phone hoping that Kia would call. She said, "Normally there would be a family get-together in Saluda. This year my daughter Renee will go, but I will stay here to answer the phone just in case. I hope wherever she is, she's safe and alive and she'll be home soon. Part of me is missing and I need to find it." The article touched the community, and especially a retired pediatrician named Casper E. Wiggins, who wrote a piece for that same newspaper the next day. He criticized the public's response, or lack thereof, aside from the first few days after Kia's disappearance, saying that the community would care about a football issue longer. He said, "A child is missing, and apart from the few days immediately after her kidnapping, the public outcry has been next to nothing. But let a Carolina or a Clemson sports event take the forefront and emotions bubble over throughout the community. Can't we show at least as much concern for the fate of a child? Pity us if we don't. Is it twisted thinking?" He believed that a higher reward fund, which it was sitting at $3,000 at that time, would incentivize someone to come forward. So he urged people to donate more to it. As a result of this, many people and local businesses got together and started doing fundraisers and donating money. For example, employees of Kmart were able to raise $650 in 1 hour. However, now 4 months later, investigators still weren't any closer to finding out what happened to Kia. They continued to investigate leads that took them as far out as California, and even tried to connect her case to other unsolved cases. Sam Riley spoke a little bit more about the investigation, saying that they were still receiving tips and potential sightings of Kia, and added that with the reward fund growing, which was now at $20,000 by the end of the year, he believed that that was, substantial enough that someone would eventually come forward. Investigators didn't speak much on the investigation as it was happening. I'm assuming probably because they didn't have too much to go on. But the fear within the Greenwood community did start to dwindle, and eventually children were outside playing again, and Kia's disappearance had pretty much become an outlier. Kia's family continued to hold faith that she was still alive, but when the 1-year anniversary of her disappearance came and went, it really sunk in that she was likely gone. The slim chance that they would receive a ransom call or some confirmation that Kia had just run away was becoming highly unlikely. Buford, the one who slept on the Logan's couch the night Kia disappeared, spoke about the case personally haunting him, saying, "Every time I open up the evidence room door, I see the bike and it's haunted me. It's a reminder of unfinished business." It would be over 2 years since Kia's disappearance that police had a real lead to finally investigate in October of 1990. On October 1st, 1990, a hunter was in the area of Newberry, South Carolina, which is about 35 miles east of Greenwood. While he was out, this man discovered what appeared to be a human skull and called the police. The skull was taken in by Newberry police, who noted that it was pretty obvious it belonged to a child. The skull showed no obvious signs of trauma. It was concluded to belong to a victim that was 13 years old or younger. They also concluded that it was left there intentionally, with one sheriff noting that it didn't appear that it was dug up from a grave. However, not much else could be determined about the victim or how they died. The skull having been left there intentionally was founded by Dr. Keen Garvin, who concluded that the skull was likely left there after the body had decomposed. Sam Riley, who was now a sheriff by this time, made contact with the Newbury police, who at this time still hadn't made a positive identification, but they were searching for the rest of the remains. After completing a search of the area, they weren't able to find any more remains in the 3 weeks that they searched, so they just had to hope that all the information that they wanted to get, they could get from that skull after they sent it off for testing. Investigators were initially convinced that the skull belonged to Kia. However, the testing that they had then was not as advanced as we have it now. Thus, the dental records and reconstruction techniques that they did use were not able to positively identify the skull as Kia's. After being sent to the University of South Carolina, it was further determined to belong to a 6 to 8 year old African American. In 1993, DNA testing done on the skull was inconclusive after being sent to Washington, D.C., which again, this testing was still relatively new. But finally, in 1966, investigators got something. The results from a mitochondrial DNA test showed that the results were consistent with Bernetta. If you're unfamiliar, mitochondrial DNA is passed on by your mother, so investigators would still have to wait a few more years before they were able to positively identify the skull as Kia's. It wouldn't be until 1998, now a whole decade after Kia's disappearance, that the skull was positively identified as hers after being sent to the FBI. Forensic investigators for the FBI determined Kia had been killed in Greenwood County and dumped in Newbury County. Over a decade later, Kia's family finally had some answers. Kia was dead, but the question that still remained was who killed her. Dennis Buford, now a sergeant, stated that while he hoped it wasn't, he felt for a very long time that the skull did belong to Kia. By the time the skull was identified as Kia's, investigators had a new suspect that they were looking at, and whom they also believe was responsible for a string of crimes against children between South Carolina and Georgia. Charles Wade Hampton was born on September 21st, 1952. At the time of his arrest, he was 5'8" and weighed about 132 pounds, and he had brown hair with green eyes. Between 1995 and 1996, Georgia and South Carolina detectives began investigating a series of sexual assaults that occurred along a specific interstate. Aside from one of the 6 victims, they all fit the same profile, being young black girls between the ages of 5 and 9. The other victim, a 5-year-old girl, had tan, olive-colored skin with dark hair, so I'm still assuming a person of color. In addition to the consistent victim profile, they all lived pretty close to this interstate, and they were all abducted from one area before being led to another. Aside from one of the girls who was simply abducted and let go, the remaining 5 were assaulted before they were dropped off at a public location. The days the victims were abducted varied, as well as the times, so police didn't realize that the attacks were connected until the 4th victim. The victims described their assaulter as a middle-aged white man with some kind of gray stubble on his face and a pockmarked face. Hampton so happened to have a pockmarked face that was made worse by poison ivy the year prior. The perpetrator had a tattoo on his bicep that some of the victims described as a snake and others described as a dragon. One of the victims also noted that the perpetrator had fat on his tummy, which is a part I'll jump into a little bit later. The vehicle descriptions the girls gave varied, with 2 girls describing a champagne gold Mazda and the others either a white Toyota Corolla or a white Chevy Celebrity. Another's description was really vague, simply describing it as an older model white compact or subcompact with a blue interior. At around the time these assaults came to an end, police began looking into Charles Hampton, who was already in police custody by this time, and when he was questioned, he began confessing. Charles admitted to changing his hair color often, a fact that was corroborated by his ex-girlfriend and wife during the time that the string of assaults occurred. At the time of his arrest, he was working as a maintenance man after being fired from his previous job for unexcused absences and excessive tardiness. Hampton was arrested in 1996 after being caught drilling a hole in a women's bathroom, which he would go on to serve 5 years for. At the time of his arrest, he was driving a white 1986 Dodge 600 and was noted by police as having a snake tattoo on his bicep as well as a tattoo of his initials. I will never understand why people do that. Police also discovered scars along his arm and stomach, which could explain what the earlier victim meant when she said he had fat on his tummy. Upon getting arrested, he was actually extremely cooperative and provided police with consent to search his home and his vehicle, as well as voluntarily providing hair and blood samples. While police were searching his home, he started giving them unsolicited information about his sex life, including the fact that he had been previously arrested and convicted for the assault of a 16-year-old based on the positive identification of his seminal fluid. In his vehicle, police found a few out-of-place items, but I guess not too much. Some things were, like, they found like toilet paper, which isn't that weird, and clothes, which isn't that weird, but his and his ex-wife's marriage certificate, which that's so funny to me. Why would he keep that in his car? Also found were nude images of women as well as torn out magazine pages of children, which of course alarmed investigators. In his home, police found photographs of children in underwear as well as nude adults, including photos of Hampton nude himself. In his laundry, police actually discovered children's underwear, which were sent off for testing. When Hampton was questioned about the string of assaults along the interstate, he suspiciously stated that the person responsible would know how not to get caught this time. Hampton then willingly, dare I say eagerly, talked to police and actually confessed to committing several of the abductions and assaults, being able to provide explicit details that some matched what actually happened during the crimes and others not so much. Hampton confessed to being responsible for 3 child abductions in Georgia, as well as the murder of another child out on a farm. Hampton was linked to a farm that was owned by one of his good friends, and he was known to spend a good amount of time out on this farm. Hampton was taken to the locations of these abductions, and it became apparent to investigators that while he knew some of the details would happen, something was off. Police decided to speak to Hampton's ex-wife and girlfriend, where they learned he drove a number of different cars over the years, including a 1977 maroon Dodge Aspen, a 1965 Chevy Bel Air, and a bronze-colored Chrysler. Police worked to identify Hampton's motive for this confession, while the testing from the 6 abductions turned up some interesting results. It was determined that a single person committed all of the abductions and assaults, but that person was not Hampton, which of course definitely casted a huge shadow of doubt on their whole investigation now. While Hampton served his 5 years for being a peeping Tom, investigators from 4 different states, including Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida, were all building cases against him. However, unfortunately for police and the victims, as soon as Hampton went to jail, he completely recanted his confessions and then just completely stopped cooperating. Fortunately for the rest of the world, the child abductions seemingly came to an end after Charles's arrest. After Hampton ceased cooperation, police realized they really didn't have any concrete evidence against him aside from his confessions. They assumed that he was using them to basically get special privileges, things like trips outside of jail, meals, cigarettes, all things like that. When Hampton's release did come, he was immediately rearrested for an abduction of a 7-year-old back in 1995. And in 2002, he was transferred to a jail in Greenwood County, where prosecutors had been building a case against him for Kia's murder. They chose not to bring it before this time due to an agreement between Georgia and South Carolina. With Hampton being in a Georgia jail years earlier, if South Carolina prosecutors did try to bring the case at that time, Hampton's trial would have been required to start within 180 days. The indictment for Kia's murder was for murder, kidnapping, criminal sexual conduct with a minor, and assault with intent to commit criminal sexual conduct. Now, if he was the perpetrator, it appeared to be a random act as there was no relationship between him and Kia. He didn't even live in the area. Hampton pled not guilty as he was facing the death penalty, which was allowed for any kidnapping or assault in which the victim is 11 years old or younger. At the time, Kia's family was more than ready to finally see someone brought to justice for her murder, but unfortunately, that would never happen. On June 22nd, 2007, now 5 years since the original filing for the indictment, the charges against Charles were dropped. Prosecutors were suddenly shaky about their ability to obtain a conviction and wanted to keep their options open should more evidence be brought against him in order to avoid double jeopardy. Charles did later plead guilty to obstruction of justice charges for lying to investigators about his involvement in the 1995 abduction and assault of a 5-year-old girl in Richmond County. He was sentenced to 8 years with 4 years worth of time served. It's assumed he's been released, but not much can be found about him on the internet. It's been now over 30 years later, and Kia's family still doesn't have any justice, and the rest of her remains haven't even been found. In 2009, the initial reward fund was added to the Malakia Logan Memorial Scholarship that was established at her hometown's Lander University. As of now, Malakia Logan's case remains unsolved, and anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Greenwood County Sheriff's Department at 864-942-8600 or the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division at 803-737-9000. So I've reached the end of today's case. Thank you so much if you stuck with me all the way into the end. Really, I appreciate it so much. I know I said in my Zodiac Killer video that I'm going to upload, that's going to be uploaded at the same time as this. I said that the next video I'm going to upload is on the Oakland County child killer, but I instead decided to film this one and refilm. I had both of those recorded already, but they were not filmed in this style. It was me talking, and I felt like I put out enough videos of me. I keep saying me talking. I'm talking in all my videos, but I mean like where I'm not showing my face in like one of those types of videos. And I figured I put out enough of those in my past few videos, so I figured I'd sit down and actually record one. So I wanted to record this one, and the Oakland County child killer is going to be the next video I'm going to upload after these series of videos I upload. But yeah, let me stop talking so much. I just want to say thank you so much again if you stayed with me to the end. Hit the like if you like this video, and also hit the subscribe so you can of course stay tuned for my next one and you won't miss that. If you do have any specific cases you want me to cover, leave that in the comments below, because I would definitely love to report on any cases that you guys really want to hear about. I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, so bye y'all.